Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you my least favorite game of the tournament. The game during and after which I felt poorly, and well, here I think it's important to talk about the psychological state, your psychological state when you're playing chess. My head wasn't in the game. As I mentioned previously, I had some family issues, so I didn't care that much about the game. And when I say this, I think it means a lot, because I usually care about every game as if it were the most important thing in the world. In any case, I still wanted to win, try to play my best chess. I was facing a very strong young player. Again, this tournament is all about young kids. I think this kid is maybe 13, 14, I'm not even sure. And he surprised me with the opening. After d4, d5, c4, c6, he took. And normally in the exchange Slav, in this position I play a6. And I've played it every game. So since he had time to prepare, and the last round was 24 hours ago, I didn't want to get into this. Now, needless to say that the alternative, playing e6, which I played, has a lot of issues connected to it. Namely, this bishop is a bad piece. And after e3, I already wasn't really sure what I was doing. I knew that bishop d6 is the main move, but exchanging my good bishop just to equalize seemed like a bad idea. Something like this is fairly standard, I'm sure. Let me check. Okay, so bishop d7, 135 games from this position, 90% of them were draws. So if I exchange my dark squared bishop, I don't really have any chances. So I played bishop b4, which is really a poor move, especially if after bishop d3 and castles you don't take on c3. So I should have taken here, but I didn't. Obviously now knight b5 is a threat, and I need to do something about it because I don't have knight a6 anymore. Again, I didn't want to trade pieces, so I played a6, which obviously my position is inferior now, but I wanted to keep the pieces on the board. Rook c1, bishop d7, a3, bishop e7, h3. Kind of unnecessary. I'm not really threatening knight h5. I think he can comfortably play bishop e5. Rook c8, b4, b5, queen b3. And this is slightly better for white, no other way to put it. Obviously, this bishop is vastly superior to my bishop on d7. I know I'm comparing bishops of different color, but we're talking about bishops on c1 and c8. If my bishop was exchanged for the bishop on d3, then it's obviously perfectly equal. Also, his bishop on d3 is better than my bishop on e7 because it's controlling a longer diagonal. Here I made a mistake. There are two ways to play this. One of them I saw and I knew as a pattern, not in this exact position, but you can give up a pawn with a5. And after bishop b5, you play a b4. And after bishop c6, bc3, something like bishop b7, let's say rook c4. Rook c3, queen c3. You should be able to get this pawn back without too much hassle, but this again is, the pawn structure is symmetrical. There is basically no way to make progress, even if I do get this pawn without any serious consequences. The alternative, queen b6, runs into knight e5, where I have to play something like rook fd8. Again, this is a candidate, but I decided to gamble, and that's never a good idea, especially against, well, players who are very good tactically, and my opponent is better than me tactically, I think. Not that I'm good, but he's better than me. I played knight e8. Now, if he doesn't do anything in this exact position, then I can play bishop d6, and I can start regaining control over the position. For example, he does nothing, bishop d6. If he trades off bishops, then my knight is great, I'm controlling c4, so probably bishop g5, but now f6. And I was ready to go into this position, seemed interesting and double-edged. I need to be careful about e5, because d5 is hanging, but I think I can get away with that. I don't think I'm losing a piece to knight d5. So for example, bishop h4, I think I can play g5 and get a position like this where I have c4, which is okay. But of course, knight e8 has to be responded to with e4, which I knew, and I was hoping he wouldn't play it. He played it fairly quickly. Now I need to take, and I need to go back. And this is an isolated queen's pawn position where all of his pieces are perfectly placed. The queen on the diagonal, the bishop on the diagonal, the knight has c5, the other knight has e5. I'm nowhere near blockading the pawn successfully. He played rook fd1, I played knight d5, he played bishop h2. I think it was better to play bishop d2 to keep the bishop in the attack. Fine. Queen b6, knight c5, rook f to d8. Okay. He played queen c2 here, g6 is forced, and now he made a mistake which is, well, if you're an engine, it's a losing mistake. But if you're a human, it's very hard to see some of the follow-ups. The immediate follow-up is easy, and once he played it and I played my next move, he thought for over half an hour, and I thought I was easily winning. What he should do here is probably bishop e4 just to lift the blockade, try to lift the blockade, something like bishop e8, maybe queen e2, knight f6, and so on. Instead, he went for a tactical continuation with knight d7. Firstly, from a strategic standpoint, this gets rid of my worst piece. So even if it works tactically for some material gain, I got rid of my worst piece. But it doesn't. Because after rook d7, knight e5, I can simply play rook to c7. And he just traded off his best piece, the knight on c5, for my bishop on d7. Also, I'm threatening to take here, and I'm threatening to take here. If he played the best move here after a very long think. If he takes on c6, which seems like the obvious option, then rook c6, queen to d2, for example, and queen d4, and white can resign. I have the c file. I'm going to trade the rooks off, and I'm going to round up the pawn on a3, after which the pawn on b4 is hanging. So he cannot take. The alternatives really are moving the queen, because if he plays a nothing move, then I just win a knight. It's as simple as that. So he needs to move the queen. Moving the queen away to b2 isn't good. It actually runs into queen d4. He played queen to d2. And now, in this position, if I play queen d4, it doesn't work, because knight f3, and after, for example, queen b6, then bishop takes c7, and I'm the one who loses. Also, knight d4 doesn't work because of knight d7. And all of this I had to calculate. It was a very complex position. For example, queen b7, and now rook c7. Not bishop c7, which I saw during the game, because if bishop c7, then knight b3, and white resigns. So again, a very complex position. After queen d2, therefore, I had to have a long think myself, and I played the best move after about 10 minutes, bishop d6. Now the edge in the position, the tension in the position is kept, and he needs to be careful, because if he doesn't do anything, I'm going to win a pawn. Now that my rook is not threatened. He blundered here. He probably, well, it's hard to find the move. Let's actually try to find the move. I'm going to turn on the engine. The engine says black is slightly better after knight takes c6, trading off everything. Okay, he's left with this isolated pawn, which is going to be weak, but not as weak because my knight is not here. Instead, he played bishop e4, losing the game, which I didn't see. But the follow-up is insane. Okay, let me show you the follow-up. So, when I played bishop d6, I didn't even consider bishop e4 to be a bad move. The only reason it could be bad is if you lose a pawn. And you actually do lose a pawn. You can take. Now, you can take queen takes d4. Okay. After rook c6, it's easy to see why queen d4 is a good move. Rook c6 doesn't work. After rook c6, queen d2. And that's it. Rook d2, rook c6, and Knight c6, rook c6, and obviously I'm clean pawn up with a superior endgame knight versus bishop. My knight can never be moved away. After queen d4 though, the move that, well, I actually looked at this briefly after bishop e4, but I immediately discarded it because queen d4, okay, knight d4, rook c7, and I thought, okay, I have knight e2, but king f1, and I stopped here. I actually didn't look any further. According to the engine, this is completely winning for black. It's hard for me to see it even now. Why? Because rook c7, king e2, I have knight c3 check, the king moves, I take on d1, king takes on d1, and I play f6. Knight f3 is forced, and now bishop h2, knight h2, and rook c3, and white is done. Rook versus two pieces, but I'm picking up all the pawns and the pieces are not coordinated. The knight is on h2. So from this position to see the final endgame, I think is, for me, for now, impossible. I didn't see it. So let's go through that again. I think it's an interesting variation. So queen d4, queen d4. Knight d4, rook c7, knight d2, king f1. It's all pretty much forced, so it's not that hard to calculate. I actually got to this point, but I couldn't see that the position is good for me. So yeah, what I lacked was the idea to recognize that this was a winning endgame, but I didn't. Okay. After bishop e4, I didn't take the pawn. I played knight c to e7, which is not a bad move. But his follow-up, his response surprised me. He played rook c5 instantly. And I didn't consider rook c5. When he played it, I immediately knew that I couldn't take it. Obviously, I cannot take it. If I take, then d takes, and my queen is completely misplaced after queen a7, and something like knight g4 is going to be devastating. But the fact that I'm an exchange up actually hinders me because I have no more pieces to contest his pieces. And I think I actually should play h5 here, just bringing the knight back. Bishop c7 shouldn't be good. But yeah, this is completely lost. So after rook c5, I cannot take. I was analyzing this position for a long time that evening, and I came up with the move queen b8, which is interesting. The engine actually says it's the best move. The idea being that now I am threatening to take the exchange in some positions, but also after f6, I'm definitely threatening rook c5. And I'm going to get control over the dark squares. During the game, though, I played f6, which seemed sensible to me. He played bishop d5, knight d5, knight g4, bishop h2, king h2, queen d6 check, king g1. Okay. And here I played for the attack. I mean, why not? I played g5 to not only to prevent infiltration on h6, even though that's important, but to give my knight the f4 square. He played rook dc1, I played king g7, supporting f6 before knight f4. He played queen e2, I played knight f4, and he played queen e3. Okay, black to play and win. Pause the video. It's in this position that I had a -5, -4, let me turn on the engine. Yeah, -4 advantage, so it's completely winning. Instead of winning the game, I lost it in one move. So try to come up with a plan here which involves the three weaknesses in white's position. This is actually a very, very instructive position for me. I was aware of two, unfortunately. So the biggest liability is the pawn on g2, mating threat. The other one is the knight. So if the knight is restricted, then you win the knight. If something is on h2, you win the knight. The third one, which I wasn't aware of, was the rook on c1. Now, the answer is free up the d5 square for your queen, threaten mate, and force white into a concession. The way you do that is you eliminate the defender of d5. Now, there are two options. If he takes with the rook, then you simply take again, and after dc5, you can play queen d1 check, and after king h2, the knight has no squares. That's simple. Okay, so you play h5 and white resigns, or does something like this, but obviously this is lost. So after rook c5, taking with the rook simply loses a piece, and that's not hard to see. After dc5, or for that matter bc5, doesn't really make a difference. You go queen d5, highlighting the second weakness and the third weakness. After queen d5, there are three defenses: queen f3, queen g3, and f3. Queen g3 fails to the simple knight e2. We don't have to look at that. Queen f3 fails to the simple queen f3, gf3, knight e2. We don't have to look at that either. So let's have a look at f3. Now we combine the two weaknesses again. You go queen a2. You can go queen f2 or knight f2, doesn't matter. If queen f2, then knight e2 check. The king moves and you take the rook. The knight defends the queen. And if knight f2, then you go knight e2 check, king f1, and again you take. And after queen takes c1, something like rook d8. I mean, it's just this is dead lost for white. I wasn't concentrated. I thought I had to be better. I didn't think that there was any way I could mess this up. And I went from -4, -5 to +6 in one move. Now, such a blunder is, well, for me at least, unusual. I don't remember making a blunder as serious as this ever, maybe. I played h5. Completely missing that now he has a tactical shot, which wins the game on the spot. He actually had a threat in this position, and I didn't respond to it. In fact, by playing h5, I made it worse. He took on f6, and I wanted to resign straight away because in a split second I saw that I'm losing, but I played on for two more moves. Obviously, I cannot take the knight. If I take the knight, then queen e5 check, queen takes, pawn takes, and I lose an exchange at least. Let's say something like this. So after knight f6, I took on c5. He played dc5. I played queen c6, trying to threaten mate. But now the move I actually did see, and I was hoping he wouldn't play it. If he doesn't play it, I could fight on. But he played knight h5, and I resigned. Obviously, knight h5, queen g5. So yeah, on move 32, I was winning. On move 33, I was losing. Needless to say, I felt devastated, and the good thing was actually that I didn't care about chess that much at this point during the tournament because I had more important issues. I would like to think that had I had a clear mind, I'd have been fully concentrated on the game. I mean, rook c5 is not hard to see. When I came home back from the tournament a week later, I put this position on the board. I took on c5, and I thought to myself, okay, why didn't I just play it instantly during the game? I saw it immediately, without using the engine, without any analysis. When I reached this position, I just took on c5, and that was it. If you set this up for me as a puzzle, I would solve it in 30 seconds with all the variations calculated, because they're not hard to see. So again, rook c, if rook c, then takes, and you win the knight. And after rook c5, if any pawn takes, then here. And this. Yeah. Anyway, this was a painful game to show. I hope you got something from it. I would like to forget about it as soon as possible. Once again, I have confirmed to myself that I hate the exchange Slav, and after this I've actually decided not to allow my opponents to go into it at all. I'm just not going to allow it anymore. I hate the opening. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.